Hey guys, my name is Pete and this is National Videography, and today we're going to do a box opening of this red Komodo 6K. And as always, we're going to do a box opening with a little bit of a difference. We're going to talk about it and discuss some stuff. Then we're also going to do, after that, a battle royale where we're going to compare this 6K red Komodo against some cameras like the Blackmagic 4K and 6K, Sony A7s III, C70 Canon, just to name a few, so be sure to stick around for that to find out which of these cameras will be the last one standing, which one of these compact cinema cameras is going to be the king of kings. So let's get to it. First things first, the box. So now we got a better box opening tool, so we're gonna get right into it. You know, it's surprising that the Komodo is actually almost a 20 megapixel camera. As opposed to like the Sony 12.1 or the ARRI 7.5. Now, it's interesting to note that the red cinema cameras actually have high megapixel as opposed to like the ARRIs, and the only one that doesn't is the Gemini. And to be honest, I feel like the Gemini, not only does it have the low light capabilities, which is why it has the lower pixel count. Lower pixel count helps with the low light, with the denoising of the low light, of not producing as much noise as high pixel count. But I feel like it also creates less saturation. It gives it almost more of like an ARRI look, the Gemini. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but they're just my personal thoughts on the Gemini and what kind of effect does the pixel count really have on the quality of the image. Heaps of stuff, and there it is. Red Komodo 6K. So this is a very exciting camera. This is obviously the crash cam, which is sort of a response to the ARRI Mini, which you know, is a surprising, you know, crash cam at $50,000, and it's been out for a while, the ARRI Mini. So this is obviously the red Komodo's sort of version. It is much lighter, much more affordable, and I think, again, for most people, it's definitely not a crash cam. One thing to also know and realize that, you know, you shouldn't be comparing the red to the ARRI, you know, because they're really different cameras for different purposes. You know, the red, it has a much more higher saturated look. It's high contrast, the blacks are crushed, it has that CinemaScope epics kind of look to it. You know, that B-movie saturated feel, you know, that horror genre, even Avengers, you know, for that comic book, there's, you know, comic colors and visual effects to it. While the ARRI is a lot of flatter image, it's got that film-esque look, it really feels like it's, you know, something like a French New Wave movie, Woody Allen, something like that, you know, and, you know, I think it has maybe better dynamic range, or at least it appears like it has better dynamic range, and honestly, these two cameras are really for different purposes, and they shouldn't be compared. They should be used in different circumstances. Tell the story to help you, you know, really get the most out of your project. And, you know, you should decide which camera is best for you, or which one you should use in that instance, based on its characteristics, instead of trying to like compare which one is better. You know, at that level, it really is more of a question of which one do you need. You know, which one is more suited for your project. When you're buying a camera, you know, these days, you're not just buying the body of the camera, you're really buying the film stock of the camera. And what I mean by that is that before, when you bought cinema cameras, you had to buy celluloid, obviously, you know, to film anything. But nowadays, because you're recording to the hard drives or internally, even if it's externally, you're still recording digitally, let's just say, you're also buying the celluloid for the life of the camera, you know, and the celluloid is made up of two things. It's made up of the sensor and it's made up of the codecs. So this is something just really important to keep in mind when we're talking about cinema cameras, that we're not just talking about the software, the body of it and everything else, but we're also talking about what kind of look it gives us. And that look is determined, again, I'm telling you, by the sensor and by the codecs. So these two things are paramount to cinema cameras. And that's why, for instance, the Fuji X-T3 I think did such a bang-up job with their, you know, video feature is because Fujifilm and Fuji create celluloid, create film stock. And so they really had really great film looks. And although it's mostly old software based, there's nothing really special with the X-T3 sensor, but that software that just creates that look, you know, it's just awesome. Even without using like raw codecs, the X-T3 really gave us a great look just by understanding that color science behind the celluloid look. So, you know, software is really important, but again, the X-T3 is not part of this competition, and because it doesn't have anything really done to its sensor, you know, it's by no stretch compact cinema camera, the X-T3. And really just the last thing on it is when you really combine the sensor with the software, that's when the magic happens. So just to reiterate about the red, and the ARRI is missing out on the Battle Royale. And although it is the OG crash camera, you know, the sort of compact cinema camera, it is not really a compact cinema camera. You know, it's always 20 meters tall, and although, you know, like the FX6 that we are going to be including in this, you know, is also pretty long camera, but we'll get more on that later. But it's still, you know, the ARRI Mini, it doesn't really sort of have that compact feature to it. You know, it's a compact cinema camera when you compare them to the really big ones, but when we're talking about mirrorless and when we're talking about this kind of level, it's really not that compact. So that's the first thing, and it's very heavy too. The other thing, it's like super expensive, and it's 10 times more expensive than the Komodo. So you know, it's simply not affordable. So not only it's not compact, it's also just not a very affordable camera. And as I said, it just wouldn't be fair to really be comparing them and seeing which one is better. So ARRI Mini is not a part of the Battle Royale, but let's get back to the unboxing. So let's open this guy up, huh? So just to make you see, this is how it looks on the opening. So, ooh, it comes with, to put this red here. Oh, should we put it there? There we go. Red. And so it comes in this little protection sleeve sort of thing. And then whoa, that's it. Look how tiny that is. That is such a baby dragon. That is such a little baby camera. And so what do you get in there? You know, more protection, like a red sticker, some kind of get started, launch sequence, download red controls, little thing going on here. Then in here, what we get some pouch with the RF to EF adapter. Yeah, I don't know, does this adapter have a foot to it? It doesn't seem to have a foot to it, like, you know, so you can screw it onto the bottom. That is not good news. But to be honest, I've been looking at other adapters. You can get the ND filter adapters. I don't recommend the variable filter. It's funny stuff when you know, film the sky, which is kind of when you want to use it. So the breakthrough lenses, they have solid ND filters. So do too, which you can use on those Canon RF EF mount drop-in ND filters adapter. There's also the keeper tie, and you know, even the Polar Pro matte box, you can have solid ND filters. You don't need to use the variable ND that you know, has the polarizer in it. So yeah, it's just something to keep in mind, because, you know, if you're using a polarizer, you could really ruin the color and just make everything just look a little bit funky. So I guess this is the charger, I suppose. Then you get a little box like this that has, I don't want to be touching something that I shouldn't be touching. Oh, okay, yeah, no. This is just travel adapters, different sockets. I don't know, what am I going to be turning on? So I guess you can turn this camera on without batteries, just using AC power. So that's what they've given me. And I wonder if it has the Australian socket. It doesn't look like it has the Australian socket though. Yeah, no Australian socket, but you know, that's okay. I didn't really expect them to have an Australian circuit. Oh, no. I stand corrected. Look at that. Oz to US. US. Oz. US. Oz. So it comes with an Australian adapter. I think it actually comes in an adapter for everywhere. And this just goes to show how much this camera is, really a dedicated travel cam. I think they're realizing that, not like how many people are going to be using this as a crash cam, but as a travel cam, I mean, man, like this compact cinema camera, it really is a competitor to your mirrorless cameras. And the mirrorless cameras, like the Sony A7S III, is becoming a competitor for the compact cinema cameras. That's why we're having the battle royale to figure out which is the best. Which one is the king of kings of compact cinema cameras? So could it be this red Komodo here? So let's get it out. Oh, it's very tightly in there. So it's going to be safely arriving to you. And there it is. And that's all she wrote. That's just how little it is. Just absolutely beautiful. The red design. It's designed like a tank, like an AK-47. Just nothing, no excess on it, just everything looks purposeful, everything looks professional, very solid. It's like a metal build to it. Definitely want to be rigging it out, but rigging it out minimalistically. So, a couple of things to go over. Battery. So no battery in the Komodo. I'm surprised they give you all of this stuff, so I guess you can turn it on. But there is no battery for the Komodo. So, you really want to be getting online and ordering those V-mount bats, those tilter. There's a tilter plate that goes on there that then you can attach the V-mount batteries, the gold mount batteries. There's different companies make this attachment, so you don't have to go with these Canon batteries, these NDs or whatever they are. It's really up to you how you go about it. I would recommend using a V-mount bat just to make it more professional. You can get slim ones. You don't have to go for the big bulky ones. But that's interesting, yeah. No, like a very kind of weird battery system for a professional grade camera. Also, another thing to talk about is that the app, it looks amazing. It just has it's just such a cool app. But that app, right? It doesn't have like any autofocus tools. Like there's no autofocus peaking, there's no zoom, and I just really don't understand, like, if that app is made for framing, why can't it also be made for referencing focus? Because like I have to now really figure out a solution to like have that focusing feature enabled, whether I use like a CineEye or the Raven or the Tower Deck, to wirelessly connect it. Wirelessly connecting it to your phone, using your phone as a monitor is a great option. People talk about the phone not being bright enough, but actually the iPhone is 800 nits, and I think it actually claims something to be over 1,000 nits if HDR is enabled. And I mean, like, the Small HG just came out with OLED monitor, right? Like sort of made for the Komodo, and it's 300 nits. So with an iPhone, you get an OLED screen that's 800 nits. So, and then you don't have to use batteries for it. It's this slim. You can charge it. You can also then use the Red app to control the camera, so you can go back and forth. I mean, like if, for instance, if you're using the CineEye or the Raven. So, like, I think, your phone, especially the iPhone Pro, is definitely a contender to be a monitor for this, especially just how lightweight, a phone is. Don't know exactly, how it all works out in the field, and I know there's latency issues. I've seen some people do some comparisons and all that, but, we have to really try it out and see if we need a professional monitor that you can obviously connect through the SDI here. Just bang up job. So much better than the HDMI, even, full-size HDMI. Although the problem is that if you want to use CineEye or the Raven, now you have to, like, get that Blackmagic adapter or something like that to convert the SDI to HDMI. So that's a bit of a problem. And, that's why, maybe a dedicated small HD monitor, definitely not the OLED one with the 300 nits. But you know, the other one that they have the two. I think there's one that's the Indie 7-inch, and then there's another like 6-inch one or 5-inch one. So either one of those, you know, Focus Pro, I think it's called, would be perfect. And you know, there's a lot of things that we're going to be talking about kitting out this camera, so, you know, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But the one thing to mention is do not buy proprietary media. I mean, I'm sorry, Red, but your stuff is ridiculously expensive, you know. The Red stuff, it's just like, it blows my mind. Even secondhand, like, for nothing, for like little add-ons to give you, I don't know, XLR ports, it's like 3-4 grand just for that little thing, you know. So just stay away from proprietary media and all the proprietary stuff. This is what makes this great Komodo so versatile, so usable. Just, you know, it's such a camera for the people. It's, you know, it really, I think, is such a competitor to the Sony A7 III through the mirrorless camera world. And I think one of the big features is that you can use other media for it. You can rig it out with other stuff very easily. You don't have to spend like a fortune on dedicated Red accessories. So there's small rig, there's tilter, there's sensor A, there's break-through lenses, what is it called, Sen 8, there's Polar Pro, there's that revolver thing for a keeper tie, although that revolver is, again, it's a little bit on the line of the Red accessories. It's ridiculously expensive, and it's also like in pounds, but it looks amazing. I don't know if that's the way to go. It seems a little bit heavy, but you know, there's definitely heaps of stuff out there, and I think they're just making this stuff, you know. I even see these little drones that you can put the Komodo on, and you know, they'll fly the Komodo for you. So, you know, a lot of exciting stuff, you know, really coming out for this camera. It's really a great year for cinematography, great year for cameras. I know, you know, things have been, you know, really you know, hit the fan this year, but as far as cameras go, you know, and IT stuff like the graphics card that we just reviewed, and you know, man, we're just leaps and bounds, you know, and a lot of just stuff that we've been waiting and anticipating for years. I think this one has been in production for like 5 years or 10 years. I mean, I've talked about this camera like 3 years ago. I think we were having a big chat about the Red Komodo, and you know, and sort of you know, seeing what it's going to be all about and when it's going to be coming out and how much it's going to be priced. And man, it's finally here. And I mean, you know, and after such, you know, an exciting year with the Sony A7, and I think, you know, even at the start we got, you know, like just hit off the bat with the S1H. So, you know, just great year for cameras, and that's why, you know, stick around for this battle royale, because, you know, we're really going to compare all of them and see which one comes out on top. Autofocus, you know, why are they using autofocus? Just kind of like, I don't know. And it's not that I'm against autofocus. I'm all for it, but I just don't understand if autofocus is not going to be professional. You know, how are you going to be able to really use it, you know, in professional circumstances? And by professional, I mean, if it's not going to be spot on, I mean, Canon and now Sony, it's like there's a little dude inside your camera pulling focus for you. If it's not on that level, I don't understand. How can you, you know, rely on it, you know, in a professional, for a professional project, you know? Yeah, maybe like gimbal work and stuff like that. But, you know, I really hope that Red really, you know, like smash this out of the ballpark and make this autofocus on par to Canon and Sony, because if they did, man, this camera would be amazing. But I don't know how easy that is, because if you think about it, Sony did it, but Panasonic is still struggling. You know, and the Fuji like X-T3, that's a horrible autofocus. So it's a big call. It's a big call, you know, and you know, we'll see where that goes. I know they just released an update. There's improvements to the autofocus. The RF glass is now supported. So I don't know, you know, maybe something will happen. So talking about the RF glass. So the beauty about the RF glass for this mount, for this camera, and you know, the fact that they've chosen an RF mount, is the image stabilization. I mean, RF glass has 5 points of image stabilization, which is a big deal if you think about like handheld work, and you know, combining that with a similar camera quality and this kind of light body. You know, now that I'm seeing this camera, you know, actually, you know, in front of me, like in real, you know, I have to admit that I kind of don't want to be, you know, really sort of rigging it out with big lenses and lots of stuff on it, you know, sort of focus pulling, you know, motors and all that, because I don't know, the versatility of it and maybe with the drop, you know, some kind of I don't know. The problem is with the RF glass, because it doesn't have the internal zoom, and you know, you want to really go for the zooms. With that zoom, you know, not being internal, you really can't put like a matte box on it. It really takes it out of like the professional sort of lenses category. And so, you know, Sigma becomes the better choice. You know, the Tokina 11-20 becomes a better choice. So, you know, it's something to consider there. But the fact that it has image stabilization and the sharpness and, you know, that extra ring, which Red have mentioned that they don't know if that will ever be able, you know, you'll be ever able to use that extra ring on the RF, you know, glass, or maybe they were talking about the adapter, but that's still, as I understand it, unusable on the Komodo. But if, you know, they they enable that feature, you know, then you can control obviously the aperture, which really, you know, then elevates that RF glass to really cinema status, although it still doesn't have that internal focusing. So, you know, if they could do that for the next, you know, generation of RF zooms, man, phew, that'd be something. So, all right, so, you know, as we moved on to like talking about the cine lenses, and you know, just that's my first impression of this camera, but you know, definitely don't be rigging this camera out. You know, don't be putting big long zooms on it. Even that Tokina 11-20, the Cine one, you know, I feel like it's just too big, because for so much cheaper you can get the photo 11-20 and it's tiny, and you can get the autofocus feature if you really need to use it on a gimbal or whatever, check your focus. And I mean, the 11-20 Tokina photo version, it's such a small light lens. Why would you opt for these big chunky housed lens for such a small little camera? And I mean, I just don't even know how different the quality would be in it, you know, like the Cine compared to the photo. I'm really considering some, you know, lens choice is super important when it comes to cameras, this kind of level cameras. So, you know, you really want to consider ergonomics when you're thinking about lenses, like for instance the Otus Zeiss and the Milvus Zeiss. And although the Otus is much better quality, I really feel that probably the Milvus would suit this camera better because they're just smaller lenses, you know. So don't be making monster eggs, and that goes with the cages. Like, if the simpler, the smaller you rig this up, the lighter it is, but yet, you know, giving you the versatility that you need, it's just going to be better for you, for sure. Get your batteries. We went through that. That stuff is on back order. So the other thing to mention about this camera is the editing. You know, make sure if you're considering this camera that your workflow is going to be able to handle it. I mean, RAW and ProRes. There's all sorts of problems when you step into that kind of, you know, workflow. No, not only do you need the GPU, the CPU, the RAM, just everything to be able to handle that, but also the size. Like, you're gonna need really good hard drives, and as we discussed in a previous video, you can't really opt when you're editing with this kind of stuff and using, you know, high-end GPUs to be working, you know, off slow hard drives. You really need SSD drives, you know, M2 drives, and they get expensive, you know, once you get up into the sort of terabytes, and this stuff is going to chew through that. So just be wary of that and understand your workflow, and you know how this will fit into your you know, current system, and that you kind of don't overspend on this camera, because also understanding lenses, like for this camera, you know, are so important if you want that look, if you want those natural colors. A lot of lenses, they give different tints, like the Sigma 18-35, you know, I feel like there's still that kind of tint to it. It's a warmer lens, so you really want neutral lenses. They are also expensive, so there's those things to consider with this camera. But I mean, look at it, it's beautiful, it's small, it's so reasonably priced. Again, very minimalistic box setup. It's just amazing. I think Red have really outdone themselves, and they've really, you know, given us a camera that's just exceeds all expectations. Welcome to Battle Royale. So we're going to compare all these cameras to the Red Komodo, and we're going to see which one comes out on top, which one is the last one standing, which one is the compact cinema camera king of kings. So a little rundown of the cameras we're going to be comparing. So we're going to compare the Red Komodo 6K to the Zcam E2 S6. which is personally my favorite Zcam. We're going to also compare the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K and 6K. Woo! Personally, my favorite out of the two is the 4K, and we'll go into why just in a little bit. Then there's also going to be the S1H, which is actually the world's first, and so far only, Netflix approved mirrorless camera. And although, you know, like the Sony A7S III, let's be honest, stole its thunder, I think it still has a worthy mention just because of that Netflix approval. And actually the quality of that camera for cinema purposes is quite good, but we'll talk about it more in just a little bit. Of course, the Sony A7S III, you know, the best round cam of 2020, but you know, the problem is it'll never be approved by Netflix. And why? We'll get into that in a little bit. So also we're going to have the Sony FX6, you know, which is definitely a contender, but I'm just afraid it just might not make the weight. Then we have the Canon C70, which is definitely like a triple threat camera, you know. Well, I don't even know what that means, but you know, it's definitely an awesome cam, and you know, we're going to talk about what are the things that, you know, might be holding it back from being the champ. Or is it the champ? I don't know. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. So let's see which one of these. They're all great cameras, aren't they? I mean, all of them are fantastic. You know, people, you know, these camera developers are really outdoing themselves. I mean, all these cameras are awesome. Let's see which one is the first to go. And unfortunately, it is the Zcam E2 S6. It's definitely a compact cinema camera body, you know, but the problem is the sensor's not really special or unique. It's a Sony sensor, you know, and with its Z-RAW, which is like half-baked, it has glitches, it's not supported by like all, if not most, platforms. You know, it's just a problematic camera, especially for professional use. And the fact that it cleans up its noise floor, and you know, it has questionable dynamic range. You know, when the tests are done for it, like, you know, Cine D did that test, you know, the results were inconclusive. So I don't know what that means, but definitely not good news. And I think you know, they definitely did discover that it does have that, you know, noise floor cleanup, which is just not cinema camera quality, as you will find, you know, soon in one of our other competitors. But so yeah, that's just the big problem. It fails to really deliver true cinematic footage, you know, even though you feel like it looks great. I think once you start playing with it and start pushing it, you really will notice that sharpening. And yeah, so, you know, a bit of a problem there, Zcam. But it has definitely great ergonomics. You know, I think definitely Zcam is a company to watch. It's like a budget version. I mean, you can see how similar that camera is to the Komodo. I think it's actually bigger than the Komodo though. But, you know, in general, I feel like the Zcam is kind of going after the Red. You know, they have the support group on Facebook. I think they're really trying to mimic the way that Red culture and how they're really you know, marketing themselves, and how they're presenting their products, and you know, their sort of company culture of the Red. So it definitely has a great spirit, the Zcam, but it's just not quite there. It's riddled with problems, and it's like one of the things is like the SSD recording. You know, it's a media it's a recording option that's like, it's a recording option of the camera, but it's not recommended by the manufacturer. So, you know, it's just things like that. So, bottom line, Sony sensor, you know, probably the denoising camera, the half-baked RAW, unfortunately rules it out first. Going to the next contender. And unfortunately, that's the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K or 6K. So we'll talk about 4K because I think it's just a better option. It is the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. The 4K came out first, and I feel like the 6K is just like a monster version of the 4K, you know, with its bigger nose. It's riddled with different kind of problems. You need really fast SSD drives to actually record in high frame rates in 6K. The fan makes noise. The body is even more ergonomically clumsy and heavy. And the fact that you can't record 4K RAW on the 6K, and you're sort of limited to the 6K format in 6K. I think it's just a problematic camera, the 6K, you know, as far as just even more problematic than the Blackmagic Pocket camera is, you know, straight out of the box. And also the EF mount. I think the Micro Four Third mount is a bit more like, it's actually almost more exciting than the EF mount, because with Micro Four Third you get some really awesome lenses. I mean, you get some really fast lenses, but you also get the Vazen anamorphic lenses, you know, and things like that. So, you know, if you're going that route, which is a budget route with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, you know, I really do recommend the 4K over the 6K. But both of them, you know, provide amazing picture quality. You know, with B-RAW, you're really buying into great celluloid. You know, it's a film stock look. The Blackmagic is just amazing, getting that secret sauce of the colors and everything. What we talked about, you know, they're really not on the sensor side of things. They're on the software side of things, and they really, you know, that codex, that second part of what that, you know, the film stock, they really nailed that. I mean, they just knocked it out of the park with that B-RAW, you know, and it just shows how, you know, software can empower a camera, because they really are just using a Sony sensor, but then they're just adding their own juice to it. You know, they're pimping it up, and they're just making that camera just like amazing. The quality, the images that I've seen that came out, like, just let's just talk about the 4K. The 4K just blows my mind. You know, in a studio setting, I think it can really easily be matched with the RE or the Red. And, you know, for how much it's priced at, I mean, I think, you know, it's like $1,200 in the US, and it's like $1,700 in Australia. I mean, that is just crazy. I mean, that is really cheap for quality like that. And I know you gotta rig it out, and, you know, it's kind of like half-baked out of the box. But, you know, it just shows what great software and codecs can do to give you that film look, and just, you know, how important it is for that film, you know, that film stock of the camera, you know. But again, as I said, on the sensor side, it really falls down, and it's really the sensor and the codecs that make up that film stock for your camera. So they're nothing special. You know, but again, there's no denoising, there's no in-camera manipulation, and it just, you know, shows what you can do. So it's like, you know, they just took that Sony sensor and they just show them what you can do with it, you know. All right, Blackmagic. I mean, they really stay true to their name, you know. So, though, unfortunately, it's kind of a camera of a bygone era, and in that sense, you know, it's getting a little old. And I know it's only like, you know, a year, and we're like, well, it's not that old, man, but it's getting old. And the problem is with its dynamic range, you know, its color quality is not quite there. It has tints. I think the 6K has less tintage than the 4K, but, you know, there's still all sorts of problems with it. And I think, again, it's because of maybe the sensor, that, you know, that they're not really manipulating the sensor or making their own sensors. I don't know what's the story behind all that technical mumbo jumbo, but, you know, it really definitely falls behind the new releases of this year. I think this S1H, the A7S3, obviously, you know, and yeah, so it can compete with the heavyweights, and but, you know, it's also really, it falls behind on the ergonomics, and I think you can see that because even the Zcam, it just has such better ergonomics. But I just think when you're talking about cinema cameras, although they're compact, that is important. And the Zcam, yeah, it wins the Blackmagic on its compact, on its ergonomic side. But because of that denoise, because of all its bugs and all its half-baked codecs and really important things, it really, you know, it's the first to go because of that. But, you know, the Blackmagic, where it succeeds in its look, it fails in its ergonomics. Because you can even look at the Panasonic BGH1 Micro Four Thirds cinema camera, and that's a box. And I think that is just showing where the industry is heading. And to be honest, you know, I think that the next Blackmagic camera, if it's, you know, ergonomically designed in like this box kind of design, this shape, ooh, it could be a serious contender for that #1 spot. But at the moment, the bottom line is Sony sensor fails to deliver dynamic range and color to rival either Red or the Canon or even Panasonic, really any of them. You know, even the Zcam, you know, delivers really nice results. And, you know, there's nothing really that, you know, the Blackmagic is awesome, but it's just not incredible. And, you know, with its awful ergonomics, unfortunately, it's the second to go. So, you know, bye-bye Blackmagic Pocket 4K. The other thing forgot to mention is also the shutter roll in that camera. It's awful, and that's talking about like the fact that it's from a bygone era. It's just the technology inside of it is just outdated for the current market. And so, you know, Blackmagic, we love you, but see you later. But, you know, one word on the Blackmagic, definitely a company to watch out for. And as I said, you know, I think their next camera is going to surprise us and really be something special. I really think that they're probably due for an update, and man, you know, I'm really looking forward to it. Moving down the list to Panasonic S1H, and you know, it's kind of like an honorary mention for this camera. It kind of came and went, and nobody really noticed it that much, although Panasonic made a huge deal, you know, promoting it for its release. You know, they really focused this camera, that it's a camera for the content creators, for professional cinematographers, for people who want mirrorless body, but, you know, cinema features in it. And it's really, you know, I would say it's a true mirrorless cinema camera. It is, and I think the Netflix approval is a validation of that. But the problem with the S1H for me, it's its longevity. And when we're talking about longevity is like, where does this camera fit into your kit? Because this is a camera that you buy when, you know, you want to get the best camera possible for your money, the best bang for your buck. So you end up buying it as an A cam. But the problem with the Panasonic is it's really bad with autofocus. You know, its autofocus is so bad that you really have to only use it as a cinema camera. So you need to manually focus your lenses and use maybe even manual lenses for it. I mean, it has great aspect ratio, different settings, and so you can use anamorphic lenses with it. But the problem is that even in the Panasonic lineup, they have better cine cameras, their Vericams, whatever, you know. So it as far as quality, it doesn't punch up there. It's just more the size of it. So once you get your kind of like better camera, then where does that camera go? Because if it becomes your B cam, a B cam that doesn't have the autofocus feature, you know, for a production company that is centered around a lot of commercial work, your B cam should really have autofocus and should have image stabilization. I'm not sure about image stabilization in the S1H, but that not having the autofocus, it sort of gives you like this, like not such like a bad version of your A cam, basically, once you get a better one. So I feel like it's a camera that you'll just end up selling just because it just doesn't have features for you to use it in other settings and for you to keep that camera even once you get a better camera, because there's still use for that camera. Because like it doesn't have the in-camera RAW, you know, and not having RAW really kind of takes it out of that cinema camera category, you know. The fact that you need to get the Atmos to make it RAW, you know, it's problematic. It's sort of, there's sort of some things that are holding it back from being like a true cinema camera. Although I have to, you know, point it out, the Panasonic, the way that they designed their sensor, the way that it does not denoise, the quality out of that sensor is truly amazing. And if you couple it with, you know, ProRes RAW, you're gonna get some great results. The problem is ProRes RAW is a half-baked kind of thing at the moment. You know, it doesn't quite work. I think it only functions in Final Cut, where you can like select the ISO and things like that. So there's problems with that, you know. The fact that this camera doesn't, you know, have the RAW already kind of puts it on the edge of not being something that you would consider. RAW is so important for your timeline and for workflow. Once you get into that cinema, once you get into that high-end quality workflow, RAW just helps you out in so many ways, and it really helps to deliver that cinematic look. The other thing is horrible shutter roll. You know, and again, this camera it's becoming outdated, and one of the things is like the shutter roll technology inside of it. I think full frame 6K filming in this camera it's unusable because of the shutter roll if you're moving it around. It's sort of kind of like the 5D Canon, you know, when that thing came out, the Mark II or whatever, back like 10 years ago, it was used on the Terminator. It was used in the Terminator as a cam, and I think they still to this day are using it. I think they used it on The Mandalorian. But the problem with that cam is, it pulls that image. It pulls that kind of quality image that you can, it can be like a BC cam. But as long as you're not moving that camera around, because the shutter roll is so awful that, once you start moving it, it just starts wobbling all around you. So that's what I'm trying to say. As an A cam for you, I don't know where you're going to find a place for it, because once you get that better camera with that better shutter roll, like global shutter, what are you going to do with the Panasonic? Because you can't just whip it out to do vlogging or some kind of doco work with lots of content, because there's no autofocus. So you can't use autofocus lenses. So if you're going to use the kind of cinema rig setup, you might as well go for your A cam with the better shutter speed, or the global shutter, for instance. There is things that are holding the Panasonic back, especially its longevity. It's sort of it's only been out for under a year or just a year, and it's already outdated. So bottom line, outdated features, unreliable autofocus, bad longevity, horrible shutter speed. I think it's gone almost then. And then the fact that it has no in-camera RAW, I think it seals the deal. Because Atmos, as good as it is, once you the fact that you have to have an Atmos to be able to record RAW destroys its ergonomics. On a gimbal or as a crash cam, if you need a screen attached to it to record in that format, well, that's a big problem as far as ergonomics go. And so I'm sorry, Panasonic, but go on. So it just goes to show how important in-camera RAW is. I think with RAW, people kind of bag in and say you don't need it, but you have to understand that this synthesis of sensor and codecs to create that film look, you really need also then that codecs to be able to give you that uncompressed, file, so you can do whatever color edits you want. You can set the perfect color temperature, and that's RAW. All those other codecs, they compress it, they're different, they don't respond that well. I mean, that's why Red is Red. They came on the scene with this RAW codecs, and then I think Red was the first one, and then Ari sort of stepped in and said we can do this too, and now Blackmagic, and it just goes to show Blackmagic how great that camera is, and it's because of B-RAW. It's because it's using ProRes. It's because it's using that high-end codecs with the Sony sensor that it's delivering such incredible image. And the Panasonic, they just haven't got that figured out. The Panasonic and Sony, they don't have a RAW yet, and I don't know when they're gonna do it, but I think when they do figure that out, their cameras are just gonna step up a level. But for the moment, because they don't have that RAW, they really struggle to be the number one choice for in the compact cinema camera kind of lineup, and we'll get more onto that in a little bit. So yeah, moving right on. Hello, and now we're at the Sony A7S III. I mean, what a camera. I mean, this camera just, man, it's a great cam by all stretch. I mean, Sony just nailed everything. They nailed the dynamic range, they nailed the autofocus. I mean, I think it was described as if you have some little man sitting inside your camera pulling focus for you. I think it's just great. And I mean, its autofocus is amazing. It's really on the level that now you can rely on it, you can use it. But so is the Canon's dual pixel autofocus. So it's not like they pioneered this in the industry, but they definitely stepped up their game, and now probably head to head with Canon as far as the autofocus goes. I don't own it, but what are your opinions? Is it just as good as the Canon? Is the Canon still better? This Sony A7 III is just such a good mirrorless camera that here it is being considered as a compact cinema camera. I mean, that just goes to show just how high quality this Sony camera is. And I think along with the Panasonic, this is the leap in mirrorless camera quality that we're seeing, and but I think, maybe Fuji is going to be the next thing that's going to blow us away. I'm a big fan of Fuji Color, and, with their film stock and, their color science, and if they implement the things that Sony are doing, with the better shutter speed and maybe the sensor, man, you know, the Fuji could be the next one to release some kind of mind-blowing mirrorless camera. But okay, enough of the Fuji, back to the Sony. So the Sony A7 III has it all, and I don't think you need me to tell you that. And I think it's a great choice as a B cam. I think this camera really does have longevity, because once you've used it up as an A cam and you upgrade it to, you know, a different kind of A cam, whether it's the FX6 in the Sony lineup, or the Red, or you know, Canon, whatever, you can use that camera as a B cam because of its awesome ergonomics, because of its awesome autofocus, you know, in-body camera stabilization. I mean, that camera is just going to live on and 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 on. So it's an absolutely great buy. You know, if you're buying you know, if you really want to get like that professional camera or upgrade, I mean, this baby is it. This is like, there's no brainer about it. But you still have to be careful with the workflow, because the Sony codecs is actually quite compressed, and if you don't have a good computer, you're going to run into problems, especially if you're trying to get the best quality out of that camera. So just make sure that your workflow is able to, you know, handle what the Sony is going to throw at you. Although, you know, that codex is definitely going to be a lot more friendly to you than, for instance, the Red, or even, I think, you know, the Blackmagic codexes. So, but it is compressed, and especially that 245, the new one, I think it's quite slow. It demands a lot of your computer. So just make sure your computer is, you know, up to the task. The colors in Sony, you know, they have the green tint. I think it's pretty easily corrected, and, you know, afterwards. Nothing really so bad there, although, you know, the color science is a problem for Sony. Their dynamic range, I mean, it's pretty, it's on paper 15, I mean, wow, and when you look at some of that footage, damn. But this is where you gotta hold on a little bit. You see, this is the problem with the Sony A7S III, and this is why it'll never be a Netflix approved camera, because what they've basically done is they denoise the floor in camera, and you can't turn it off. Because I think you can turn off some features, you know, when you're recording to the Atmos with the Sony, like some of the other things like lens corrections. That camera is doing corrections for you. Like, it's a camera that does those things, and that's just not something that cinema cameras should be doing. Because, you know, when you film into the celluloid, when you film into film stock, there's nothing going on there in the camera, you know. You're doing all that in post. And so the fact that the camera is doing it for you, it harpers creativity, and it's not good for professional workflows where you're giving this maybe footage to somebody else to work on. And, you know, if you've got these camera things happening in there, that could be a problem once you start pushing things around in post. So, but the worst thing is what they've done, they've denoised the floor. So because of that, it shows up that it has more dynamic range than it should. Like the S1H is not denoised, so it actually has more true dynamic range, the S1H. Or it's kind of similar, you know. It's kind of the similar on the Sony A7 III, even though the Sony A7 III claims more because of that denoising. It's actually artificial dynamic range. So that brings it to the fact that you're gonna have that sharpening, no matter what you do, no matter whether you record on Atmos or internally. And it's not going to be your lens. It's not going to be that, you know, that 3D wrap from the background, you know, that those expensive lenses or the good lenses, you know, really give you. It's going to be that sort of like unwanted video-esque sharpening of, you know, everything, and sort of just, and that you can't get rid of. And that's why it'll never be a Netflix approved camera. It is just, you know, something that is in a professional workflow, it's not acceptable. And if you can't turn it off, it just disqualifies the camera as being a true cinema camera. You know, as I said, the compact is important, but the cinema camera is the key in all this. So unfortunately, you know, it disqualifies it. And the fact that you have to connect it to the Atmos to record RAW, it has no in-camera RAW, is also a problem, you know. I think you know, it just goes to show that Sony is not truly aiming this camera for cinema use, because it's a user-friendly camera that does a lot for you right off the bat, you know. So you really get those great image inside, in camera, and unfortunately, that's a problem in our comparison. So the bottom line is it's an awesome camera that would live long in your kit, you know, as an A cam, then a B cam, right down to whatever, your crash cam, your vlog cam. I mean, this camera, it's going to be a workhorse. But with the in-camera manipulation, that denoise floor that you can't take off, and no in-camera RAW, which destroys its ergonomics, as we talked about with the Panasonic, unfortunately, sorry guys, but it's the next to go. It's a sexy cam. Well done, Sony. That arrivederci. You know, I really think that Sony cam made some people really worried. You know, I think they were holding their breath, because if they just nailed that denoising in that camera and they just made it just as good without those in-camera manipulations and added RAW to it, in-camera RAW, whew. I mean, watch out. Real serious contenders here, and this camera just recently came out. I think it's even newer than the Komodo, which is the Sony FX6. Amazing camera. You know, you got the digital ND filters in there, but the problem is the ND filters I can add, or maybe not digital like that, but with the RF to EF mount, you know, you can get those drop-in filters. The thing I can't get is in-camera RAW. The FX6 does not have it. And that's a problem, you know. That's a problem for workflow. I mean, it's not a problem if you're doing just documentary work and you just, you know, you need well-sized files. You know, you're doing YouTubing, whatever. But if you really want to get that image quality, and as we were talking about, to censor that, to synthesize that, you know, sensor and codecs to get that best look, to get that best quality, you really need the RAW. So no in-camera RAW codecs, you know, really fails that synergy of sensor and codecs, you know, which is so important to really get that benchmark, you know, of a cinema style, a cinema quality camera. And you know, you can get the RAW with the, you know, through SDI connection, actually, with the Shogun, but you know, then it fails ergonomically. And already the FX6 is a big camera, and we're going to talk about it just in a second. So if you're going to have to add a monitor like all the time to actually get that RAW feature enabled, that's going to be a problem. And that's, you know, its ergonomics is just going to be blown right out of proportion. And talking about its ergonomics, you know, Sony really dropped the ball here, because what they did, it basically is the same as the FX9, right? And the C70, which we'll just get into in a second, is the C300. And what Sony did is they chopped their camera lengthways. So the FX6 is the same length as an FX9, but it's thinner. Like, yeah. And the Canon, though, it's shorter. So it's the same width, but it's much shorter than the C70. So it's more of like a box shape. While the FX6 still has that like kind of elongated, kind of like, you know, pro camcorder kind of feel to it. And so it's just horrible for gimbal work. It actually feels like it's ergonomically not a compact camera. And, you know, just on that, I don't think it's a true, you know, compact camera, you know, design. And, you know, I just think that it's a bit of a half-baked attempt at making a smaller FX9, where they really did drop the ball on it. So bottom line, no in-camera RAW, too big. Sorry, but not sorry, Sony, you're gone. But one thing to note here, if they do redesign that body, if they make it more of a box, like, you know, the sort of more along the line of what the Canon did with the C70, man, this one could be a real serious contender, the FX6, you know. You know, with its new autofocus features and everything, you know, even the fact that it doesn't have RAW, but the fact that its quality on other specs is so high. I'm not going to go into all of them right now, but, you know, it definitely does well. If it was in a better body, but with the same kind of features, man. And if they got, like, if they figured out RAW, in-camera RAW, watch out. Canon C70, you know, it's almost a perfect camera. I mean, you know, you got ND filters, you got industry-leading dual pixel autofocus, dynamic range. I mean, whoa, color science, Canon color science. I mean, nobody complains about Canon color science. I mean, there's a few people that do, but yeah, come on. You know, they did it right. They made it like a box. It seems pretty small in size, you know, very compact. Got image stabilization, you know, with the RF lenses. Man, that camera, do you even need a gimbal for it? And the list just goes on. It's a baby C300. But, no in-camera RAW. No Canon Light RAW. And like, look, Canon is a big corporation that is known to handicap their cameras. Because you know what they're doing, they don't want their cameras to be competing with their own lineup. You know, they don't want any friendly fire going on. So they handicap their cameras on purpose. Like the R5, they don't care that it overheats. It's not a problem for Canon, because Canon probably feels that, well, if you want a camera that gives you that kind of quality level, you got to spend a little bit more. And we've got it. The C500, the C300, you know, they're expensive cameras. Very high quality footage. So with the R5 was being, what is it, like, you know, like 5K, what do you expect for that price point? But for content creators, 5K is a lot of money. And we want a camera, if it says it's going to do 8K, we want it to do 8K, you know. For us, R5 is completely useless as any kind of camera. And people try to justify it and use it, but the fact of the matter, that camera is unusable in professional context. I don't know about photography. Maybe, again, like it's like such a specific camera. Like, what for do you need this 8K, just like this burst of 8K? Are you really going to have like a whole camera system in place to be able to record 5 minutes of 8K footage? No. So, you know, and this is the problem with their cameras. And the C70, you know, it has perfect everything, but it has no RAW capability. Even if you, you know, get the Atmos through HDMI link, no RAW. So, you know, and this kind of handicapping, you know, it's smart, but it's foolish, because you need to foster, you know, customer confidence and loyalty. You know, as I just said, like when you're buying into a camera, you're buying more than just a camera. You're buying into the camera system. You know, there's a lot more that goes on, goes into buying a camera than just the body. Like the lenses, you know, those RF lenses are so expensive, you know. And so handicapping your cameras, it just doesn't make sense in the long term. You know, you can see how many people that turned away from the Canon because of that. And they sort of ran to Sony. For us, for content creators, you know, when we get a camera, especially if you're like a YouTuber or something, or you know, you're doing things on a, like where the quality is less, you want cameras that perform. You want the cameras that give you the best possible, you know, features that they can, like, you know, you get with the Red, you get with the Sony, for instance, the A7S III, but with the Canon, even the C70, because it doesn't, they have Canon Light RAW. Now, I don't know how good Canon Light RAW is, and maybe it's a little bit half-baked, like the ProRes RAW. It doesn't work with all the platforms. Maybe it doesn't have all the features enabled, or maybe just on some editing platforms you can, you know, control the temp and things like that. I'm not sure about it. I mean, it's obviously a light version of RAW, but the fact that they don't have it, for me, just, you know, is a huge downfall, because as we're talking about the synthesis of, you know, the sensor and the codecs, and with the C70 having, you know, really good otherwise specs, not having that codecs to back it up is a huge downfall. Because when you're talking about professional workflow, you know, that raw codecs, it really, you know, opens up so much versatility. And it's sort of the expected format, and it safeguards you, you know, not having to pre-bake things in camera when it's really important, when you're on really expensive shoots that you cannot recreate, you know. As I said, this is a perfect camera for, you know, out there kind of like sort of, you know, capturing docker work, long format stuff. It's amazing. But if you want that camera, you know, shoot quality, and you need the RAW. That's why I've seen like some of the footage from the C70, especially when they don't use the best codexes and the, you know, the best settings, it looks very video-esque. And it's the codecs that's the problem. And it's something that, you know, Sony, Panasonic, and Canon are yet to figure out. And this is where like Red has really took the industry by storm when they came out with Red 1, because it came out with that Red RAW codecs. And then Ari jumped on board, you know, and we having that, because it's the closest thing to actually being able to film on film stock without having to use celluloid. So it's the perfect solution. I think before that, the industry wasn't really ready to jump into digital. You know, they wasn't sure when that was going to happen. And with the RAW codecs, they could really then work these sensors and make them, you know, to sort of get that film feel and look to them. The fact that Canon are not doing it, you know, just really handicapping their camera. And it just, you know, because it was always my first choice, you know, the C70, because of just so many features, you know, and the, you know, it's just so usable, the C70. But I think it's a perfect B cam, especially for the Komodo, you know, because with the C70 you get docker work, you know, long form when you need that autofocus, that dual pixel autofocus, that stabilization. I mean, there's so much versatility with that camera, plus the RF lens lineup. I mean, it's the same mount as the Komodo. So I think the C70 is a match made in heaven when you're talking about a B cam for the Komodo, because where Komodo falls short, like the in-body camera stabilization, like the autofocus, the C70 has those things, the ND filters, right? Like, it's just so usable out in the field, the C70. It's a perfect partner to the Komodo with the same mount, and you get those RF zooms. Man, you're killing it, right? And you know, you so much. You're like, with those lenses are so expensive, and that you can interchange them between A and B camera. Boom, you know. So I think it's a perfect B cam for the Komodo. I mean, also the Sony A7, but because of that same mount, you know, with the C70, I think, you know, it's definitely it's a leg up from the Sony. I don't know how compact, but the C70 looks compact enough to me, you know, to chuck it on a gimbal. In fact, sometimes a little bit of weight, a little bit of body to a camera is not a bad thing. Like, you're probably going to rig out that Sony anyway, you know, the A7S III. You're probably going to put it in a cage or something. So, and I think like the Canon really has it on dynamic range, color science, just the overall look of it. But the problem is there's no RAW, not even a possibility of RAW. And you know, it's a problem, you know. You know, but with that mount, it just makes perfect sense as a B cam. So anyway, the bottom line is no RAW capabilities. Even with an external monitor, you know, no way, you're never getting RAW from a C70 as it stands currently. And it just really kind of eliminates it from a true compact cinema camera standing, you know. It's disqualified. Sayonara. Yeah, but you know, I wonder if it's a software thing, you know, because if the Canon C70 got in-camera RAW, it would be unstoppable. I mean, it would be my choice, because honestly, all the other features that it has in it, and with RAW, I'm sure the look could be so similar to even the Red. Like, okay, on the Red, you will get that film look like we talked about, that sort of the cinemascope, the horror, the saturated colors. I mean, that's secret sauce, you know. That's like the RE, the Red, secret sauce stuff. And you know, all the other manufacturers at the moment, they're not on that league. But man, you know, Canon is very close. Canon, Panasonic, and Sony, although how close they are, they don't seem to be investing in the RAW codecs, which is so important, you know, that it's not just the sensor, it's also this codecs and, you know, how it all comes together. And, you know, until they do that, I don't think they can compete with the Komodo. And the fact that the Red is now at their price point, you know, unfortunately, I think, you know, as far as like a cinema camera, that's where the Komodo shines. And now that it's a compact, you know, the Red is just as compact as like a mirrorless camera. Damn. So we get to the Red Komodo, the crash cam to end all crash cams. Man, I mean, who uses this as a crash cam? Man, I'd wish to be that person, right? I mean, just chuck this out of an airplane. But no, this is so versatile, this camera. I mean, you don't have to actually destroy it. I mean, you can chuck it on a gimbal. You can, you know, those drones that are flying it. I mean, the versatility of this camera, getting into tight spots, getting those crazy cool Polanski angles, you know, in the bathroom, whatever you want to do. I mean, this opens up creativity. And I mean, it's like the Alexa Mini, you know, it was a crash cam, right? It's the OG crash cam, but people are not using it as a crash cam. I mean, 1917 is entirely shot on the Alexa Mini LF, I think, right? And so, you know, I don't think this camera will be used as just a crash cam, because of its versatility, you know, I mean, and its size, and it's just getting that picture quality, and the fact that it has global shutter, which is not something that the other cameras in the Red lineup, as far as I understand, don't have. Just kind of puts it a little bit above the rest, you know, as an actual, as like a real choice for this being an A cam on a professional production. And I think the fact that Netflix approved it just, you know, validates that even more, you know. I mean, it's truly the baby dragon, you know. And I think Red went, you know what? You know, they just went all out with this. Then didn't do what Canon did, you know. They didn't handicap their camera. They put everything into it, you know, except the frame rates and the recording formats, you know. I really believe that it surpasses its, you know, bigger, more expensive brothers and sisters almost in every way, right? And I mean, the formats are coming. As far as I understand, the 4:3 anamorphic is coming, or at least I'm waiting on it. But, you know, the frame rates, okay, maybe that's where the DCMs still have a place, you know, the faster frame rates. Maybe they will always have more recording formats and things like that. You know, they're obviously heavier, more rigged out sort of possibility camera, you know, so. But I really think that the Red is turning a corner with the Red Komodo. I think we're going to see possibly an improvement of their lineup, you know, that we're going to see Red, you know, release an update to their DCMs, because this camera really sort of undercuts them. You know, they didn't do what, you know, normally manufacturers do, is release these handicap cameras, hold back on features, you know, so they can release it in, you know, the next generation or whatever, or for their more expensive camera. They sort of went all out and put everything that they had into it. Very much like the Intel's RTX 3090. They really shook up the industry with this camera, you know, and giving it that price point that undercuts its own cameras, you know, offering more value, you know, for substantially less. And, you know, it's just something that's happening now. It's a crazy year, and it's ending, you know, with the RTX 3090, you know, like killing the industry, you know. I mean, that thing just mowed down the 2000 series, and now the Red Komodo. I mean, you know, it is the baby dragon, but it looks like that this baby dragon, you know, can take on, you know, the big dragon. And yeah, it's amazing, and it's awesome, and it's great to see manufacturers doing that, you know, releasing cameras, you know, that are, you know, cost less but better featured, and not worried too much about their own lineup and, you know, their own sort of bottom line. Well done, Red. So as we talked about, you know, to get that film look, to get that celluloid film stock, you really need to, you know, combine the sensor and the codecs. You know, when the synergy of that happens, that's when you get that magic, and that's when you can actually, you know, ditch the celluloid, ditch the film stock, and shoot your movies on hard drives, on digital formats. And Red, I mean, they blow that away. They're the pioneers in the industry of this. And I think this camera just goes to show how good you can be when you do those things, you know? Like with the Blackmagic, it's only software, so it can take us only so far. You know, you don't get that, you know, like that feel of cinema with the Blackmagic as you do with the Red, especially once you get it out of the studio, get it into those more trickier situations where the dynamic range is, you know, is spread out, where the skin tones, where the different color lighting. I mean, this guy just, you know, I think it blows everything away. You can see some of the Red ads on it, and I mean, it's amazing, you know, because of course you need to, you know what to do with this camera, as with any camera really, but especially when you're getting to the cinema class, you know, the things, you know, if you know what you're doing with this, the image you can pull from it. That's why RAW is so important. It's not important if you just want straight out of the camera, YouTube, you know, easy workflow, but if you want to get the best quality, that's when like RAW becomes that difference to you, you know. And so, you know, with the global shutter in this camera, I mean, that is something that is definitely points to the fact that Red are tinkering with their sensors. I mean, that is new technology. I think even for Red, that's new technology. And I mean, that is a technology that brings us, again, ever so closer to actually like what real, like the closest we can get to like shooting on film. Because when you shoot on film, you have that global shutter thing, you know? You don't have this rolling shutter when, you know, you actually shoot on celluloid. The gate opens, the light floods it. It doesn't flood it in sections, it floods it all at once. Global shutter. And I mean, you see, that's what I'm saying. Like, you want to get as closest to the original, the OG way of, you know, like they did movies. If you get as closest to that with digital format, that's the secret sauce. And these guys pioneered that. And so, you know, the quality you get on that is that because it's not a compromised camera. And, you know, that's where, like, you see the Sony A7S III, you know, really fall down, how they just sort of improved their software, you know, because they didn't change so much, maybe even the sensor, you know, like with the X-T4, they didn't change at all the video capabilities, X-T3, X-T4, they sort of improved the software and they put out this camera. So with the Sony as well, I don't know how much they did to that sensor, like they must have done something, but I mean, maybe it's just all computer, like the denoise and the stuff like that, a better computer, more stuff, you know, it's doing to the camera in camera, and it's giving you that, you know, sort of better quality, and it's all like digitally enhanced, you know, because their solution to rolling shutter is a faster computer inside the camera that basically reads the rolling shutter so fast it sort of nullifies that issue. But I mean, global shutter is a technology that's coming from the sensor, right, all the way to the codecs, and it's bringing us that other step closer to getting that film look, you know, getting that true, the way that they used to shoot on celluloid, on film stock. So, you know, we really get new sensor technology here. And again, something that I don't think see in any other camera at the moment. And that's why this is really, you know, a landmark achievement for the Red. And this kind of synergy of sensor and codecs is the best thing you can have. You know, this is what ARRI gives you. But I mean, this is so much cheaper, so much more accessible. This brings us to the fact that the Red has always been a camera for the people. You know, and I think the Red Komodo seals that deal. With the Red One, when it came out, I mean, it was insane. And you have to put this into perspective. I think it was something like 25 grand, 20 grand when it came out, like US or whatnot. But that was so crazily cheap compared to what back then we thought like cinema cameras were worth. Because you shot on digital format, you mean that for like independent filmmakers, that allowed us to make movies, because one of the hugest expense of actually shooting in like professional format was the film stock that you know you have to spend so much money on film stock and, you know, getting it, you know, going through all the steps of it, digitalize, you know. But now that you could you record digitally, have a camera that's not, you know, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, it really brought cinema tools to the people. You know, and I think that's how Red started in this industry. That's, you know, what they came out with, a camera for the people for a price point that is way below the expectation of cameras that quality, and revolutionizing the industry. Because as I said, you know, shooting digitally is a much cheaper option than shooting on celluloid. And with the Red Komodo at $6,000, you know, it's truly now a cinema camera for everyone. Because at that price point, it's competing with the mirrorless, it's competing with any other brand or manufacturer that's trying to push these compact cinema cameras on the market, and it's bringing you true cinema quality in a compact size and at an accessible price point. I mean, we're done. What else? Autofocus. Yeah, autofocus. So anyway, bottom line. Global shutter technology, dynamic range, red color signs, red raw codecs, baby. I mean, insane ergonomics. Just look how small it is, you know, and it's so light. I mean, this thing is just, I mean, it literally, you know, compared to a cinema camera like the Red Dragon or something, yeah, man, you know, I don't know how many how many Komodos you could fit into a Red Dragon sort of body, but it's a few. The Red Komodo 6K is the undisputed king of kings of compact cinema cameras. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the unboxing of the Red Komodo 6K and the Battle Royale. Please leave any comments and questions you might have. I look forward to chatting with you guys further in the comment section below. Give us the old thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. And if you didn't like this video, it'd be appreciated if you just gave us also a thumbs up, maybe left a comment and told us, what you didn't like. And then subscribed so that you can see how we improve in the next video. Alright guys, stay safe, stay gold, and stay creative. Pete signing off.